The interview room was overly bright, almost as if they wanted to expose every detail of the candidates. Every minute, new faces walked in and out, some filled with hope, others already defeated by nerves. When Angela, a black woman with a steady gaze and impeccable posture, walked through the door, all eyes turned to her. It wasn't just for her simple elegance, but for the confidence she carried. The recruiter, a man in an expensive suit with a fake smile, flipped through her resume with disdain. He frowned as if looking at something impossible. Impressive, MBA, international experience, fluency in 3 languages. You are, without a doubt, the most qualified candidate I've seen today, he said, his voice dripping with irony. Angela smiled, confident. But then his tone shifted. But you see, here we value a certain image. An image of sophistication, of people who fit the company's profile and, well, I'm not sure you do. The room fell silent. The other candidates sitting in the back exchanged uneasy glances. Angela kept her composure, though her heart was racing inside. She took a deep breath and replied firmly, "Are you saying that despite my qualifications I'm not suitable because I'm black?" The recruiter chuckled cynically. "I didn't say that. But let's be realistic. Our clients expect a certain standard, and that standard doesn't include people like you." The words fell like a sharp blade. The wound was not only in Angela's pride, but in the weight of the historical injustice she knew she carried. A murmur grew among the candidates. Some lowered their eyes in shame at what they were witnessing. Others shook their heads, outraged. Angela, with dignity, stood up. Her tearful eyes were not a sign of weakness, but of restrained revolt. She stared at the recruiter and said, her voice steady, "You may reject me, but you cannot erase who I am. A person's worth is not in the color of their skin, but in their character." The man merely shrugged, returning to his papers as if she were invisible. And so, with a heavy heart, Angela walked out of the room, leaving behind the shadow of humiliation, never imagining that, in just a few minutes, life would take a turn that would change everything. Angela walked down the hallway, trying to control her breathing. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face remained serene. Since childhood, she had learned never to show weakness in the face of injustice. As she moved away, she noticed the stares that followed her like shadows. Some of the other candidates whispered among themselves, "It's a shame. She seemed so prepared," whispered a blonde young woman, trying to hide the compassion in her eyes. But another, an arrogant man in a sharp suit, scoffed loudly. "Prepared? Don't be naive. This company would never put someone like her in front of the clients. This is a different level." The words struck Angela like stones. She took a deep breath, lifted her head, and walked on firmly. But what hurt wasn't just the spoken words. It was the looks that didn't need sound. Some measured her from head to toe with contempt. Others looked away, as if ignoring was easier than being outraged. And there were those who watched in silence with an air of, "I knew this would happen." Deep inside, Angela remembered her childhood, when her mother used to say, "Daughter, you will have to be twice as good as the others just to earn half the respect." Those words now came back like a painful echo. She had worked hard. She had studied entire nights, worked low-paying jobs, overcome obstacles that many there could never imagine. And still, it wasn't enough. When she passed again through the waiting area, she noticed something even worse. One of the older managers was whispering with the recruiter who had just rejected her. They laughed quietly, as if sharing a cruel joke. Angela couldn't catch every word, but she heard enough. Did she really think she had a chance? Look at the audacity. Her heart tightened. The hallway seemed to narrow, as if the very space conspired against her. She tried to remain strong, but when she reached the door to the women's restroom, she felt the need to take refuge. She pushed the door open and walked in. The mirror stared back at her. Her tearful eyes reflected not only her pain, but an entire life of fighting against looks that diminished her without ever knowing her. She placed her hands on the sink and let out a nearly inaudible whisper. "Why, my God? How long?" The tears finally fell, but silently, contained, as if she refused to give the world the satisfaction of seeing her broken. And as Angela pulled herself back together outside, the stares continued, some filled with judgment, others with discomfort, but all cutting into her soul like invisible knives. She didn't know yet, but this would only be the beginning of the turning point that would change not just the course of her life, but also of all those who had dared to despise her. The reception clock was nearing noon. The waiting room was already crowded, and the candidates alternated between nervousness, hope, and competitive stares. Angela, after pulling herself together in the bathroom, decided to return and wait. A voice inside her told her she shouldn't stay silent, that she still needed to fight. When she entered again, the atmosphere shifted. Some averted their eyes, others whispered, but everyone already seemed to know what had happened in the interview. It was as if the rejection had spread like smoke through the entire room. The recruiter, now more relaxed, walked across the hall with an air of superiority. He looked at Angela and, without the slightest care, spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Some resumes are really deceiving, aren't they? Some people think that just because they studied abroad, they can claim a prestigious position, but our company doesn't work that way. Angela felt her heart race. This wasn't just a rejection, it was a public shaming. One of the candidates, the same arrogant young man from before, laughed mockingly. "That's right, a diploma isn't enough here. You have to look like a leader. And let's be honest, that's not for everyone." His laughter echoed through the hall, and some, even if they didn't agree, stayed silent out of fear of getting involved. The complicit silence was just as painful as the words. Angela closed her eyes for a moment, trying to gather strength. She stood up and spoke, her voice firm though trembling slightly, not from fear but from indignation. "What you're doing isn't a professional evaluation, it's racism. I have just as much right to be here as anyone else." The recruiter smiled cynically and replied, "Careful with what you say. You could make things even worse for yourself if you insist on that kind of accusation. Companies don't like conflicted people." At that moment, all eyes fell on her, some with pity, others with coldness. The room was filled with embarrassment. Angela realized she was alone in that battle, and holding back tears, she grabbed her bag and prepared to leave. But before she did, she turned to the group and said, "Remember this, a person's worth is not measured by the color of their skin, nor by the arrogance of the powerful. Life always turns, and God's justice never fails." She walked toward the door. The sound of her heels striking the floor echoed like a silent protest, and as she crossed the hallway, the room was overtaken by a mix of feelings: shame for some, relief for others, and the recruiter's intact arrogance as he muttered, "Another one who didn't understand the game." What no one there could imagine was that the game was about to change in such a radical way that they would never forget that day. Angela hurried back to the bathroom. Her hands were trembling and her breathing was heavy. As she closed the door behind her, she leaned against the cold wall and let the weight of humiliation crash down on her shoulders. There, in the silence of that sterile space, far from the eyes that judged her, she allowed the tears to flow freely. They were not only tears of defeat. They were tears of anger, of accumulated pain, of memories that returned like daggers to her heart. She looked at herself in the mirror. Red eyes, smeared makeup, a weary expression. And for a moment she remembered herself as a child, back when she used to dream big. She recalled her mother with calloused hands, repeating like a prayer every night, "My daughter, never forget. You are a daughter of the Most High God. People may reject you, but He will never abandon you." Those words echoed now, mingled with the sound of her tears falling. Angela took a deep breath, trying to pull herself together. She sat on the bench against the wall, hugging her purse as if it were a shield. "I gave everything I had. I studied, I fought, I worked twice as hard. And still, all they see is my skin." The emptiness of the bathroom seemed to answer her with silence. A cruel silence. Suddenly, the door opened slowly. It was a young cleaning staff worker, also black, with a humble look and a uniform worn down by time. She hesitated when she saw Angela, but then stepped inside carefully. "Sorry to bother you. Were you okay?" she asked gently. Angela quickly wiped her eyes, trying to regain her composure. "I'm fine, thank you." But the young woman looked at her deeply, as if recognizing another woman's pain. "I heard what happened out there and don't mind them. In here, things never change. But I believe God prepares justice for everyone." Those words touched Angela like a balm. It wasn't just comfort, it felt like a divine message, a reminder that she was not alone. She held the worker's hand and smiled with gratitude. "Thank you. You have no idea how much your words helped me right now." When the young woman left, Angela stood up. She looked at herself in the mirror again, but this time her gaze was different. There was still pain, still tears, but now there was also a spark of strength, of something greater about to unfold. She fixed her hair, wiped away the smeared makeup, and took a deep breath. "They think they defeated me, but they don't know who I truly am. They can't imagine what's coming." With firm steps, she walked out of the bathroom, and on the other side of the hallway, a man discreetly observed her exit. A company director, with an intrigued expression, seemed to recognize her from somewhere. The story was about to take an unexpected turn. Angela walked slowly down the company hallway, her heart still heavy. The echo of her heels on the polished floor sounded louder than ever, as if each step were being watched and judged. But there was someone who truly was watching her. At the end of the corridor, a middle-aged man, elegant and with a piercing gaze, followed her carefully. His suit was not like the others. It carried the sobriety of someone who held real power. He was Richard Coleman, one of the company's executive directors. Unlike the others, he didn't seem in a hurry to judge her. His eyes did not convey arrogance but curiosity, and a certain recognition. Angela noticed his stare and, instinctively, tried to move away. She no longer wanted to be analyzed, nor observed like an object on display. But before she could leave, Richard called out, "Wait a moment, miss." She stopped, took a deep breath, and turned around. "Yes?" she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Richard walked toward her with slow, almost solemn steps. For a moment, the hallway seemed to fill with silence, as if the world itself were holding its breath. He was holding a piece of paper, her resume. He looked at the document, then at Angela's face, and said, "This resume, it's yours, right? Angela Williams?" "Yes." He stared at her more deeply, narrowing his eyes as if trying to confirm a distant memory. "Angela Williams. By any chance, are you the daughter of Michael Williams?" Angela was surprised. Few people knew who her father had been. A simple, hardworking man, but one who, years ago, had had an unexpected connection with powerful businessmen in the city. "Yes, my father was Michael. But why do you ask?" Richard sighed. His eyes shone with a mixture of emotion and respect. "I knew it. I knew I recognized that name. And that look. Your father was an extraordinary man. He once saved this company from disaster, even though he was never publicly acknowledged. We owe him more than you can imagine." Angela was speechless. Her mind spun in confusion. How could her father's name be linked to the very company that had humiliated her minutes earlier? Richard looked around, making sure no one was listening, and said quietly, "Miss Williams, I need you to come with me. There are things you need to know, but please don't say anything yet." The silence that followed was almost suffocating. Angela only nodded, still not fully understanding. Richard made a discreet gesture and led her to a private room upstairs. As they entered, Angela felt a mixture of fear and hope. Was this going to be another humiliation? Or was she about to discover something that would change her life forever? On the other side of the door, a revelation awaited, and once it came to light, it would leave no stone unturned in that company. Angela entered the conference room, led by Richard. The space was vast, imposing, with a dark wooden table that seemed to carry the weight of decades of important decisions. The walls displayed portraits of the company's former presidents, every single one of them white men, all with expressions of authority. The contrast did not go unnoticed by her. Richard closed the door behind him and sat across from Angela. For a few moments, silence reigned in the room. He observed her as though he were still trying to piece together a puzzle. "Angela, you really don't know, do you?" he asked, his voice carrying something between astonishment and admiration. She frowned. "Don't know what? You're confusing me. I came here for a job interview and all I received was humiliation. What else could there be?" Richard took a deep breath, resting his hands on the table. "Your father, Michael Williams, was not just an ordinary employee. He was one of the founders of this company. Without him, nothing you see here today would even exist. He invested, built, and believed in the dream that later became this corporation." Angela's eyes widened. "That can't be true. My father died poor, without any recognition." Richard nodded slowly. "Because his place was stolen, they took away his credit, erased his history, and handed the glory to others. But the records exist, and I have them here." He opened a folder and revealed old documents, contracts, signatures, investment records, and there it was, Michael Williams's name. Angela covered her mouth in shock. Tears welled up again, but this time they were not of pain, but of disbelief. "My father. He always said there were things I would only understand in the future. But I never imagined this." Richard then looked at her with solemnity. "Angela, according to these documents, you don't just have a place here. You are the majority heir of this company. You are the rightful owner." The words echoed like thunder in her heart. For a few moments, the world seemed to stop. But the impact didn't end there. Richard stood up and opened the conference room door. On the other side, several board members were gathered, along with the very recruiter who had humiliated Angela minutes earlier. Richard raised his voice firmly. "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce Angela Williams, not merely a candidate, but the rightful owner of this company, the daughter of Michael Williams, the true founder." The room fell into a deadly silence. The recruiter, who had once laughed with disdain, now turned pale, unsure where to hide his face. Some board members exchanged tense glances. Others lowered their heads in shame. Angela stepped into the room with steady steps. Every gaze that fell upon her was now different, a mix of shock, disbelief, and fear. She stood before them, lifted her chin, and said with a firm voice, "Moments ago, I was treated as if I were worthless, as if my skin color were an insurmountable barrier. But today you stand before the truth. I don't just belong here. I lead this place." The silence was broken only by the heavy breathing of those who had mocked her. It was the weight of shock that froze the room. And what came next would prove, once and for all, who truly held the power. The boardroom felt suspended in time. The silence was so heavy that each passing second dragged on like an eternity. Angela stood before them all, her heart racing but her gaze steady and unshakable. The same recruiter who had humiliated her only minutes earlier could no longer look her in the eye. Sweat trickled down his forehead, and his once arrogant posture had crumbled into pure submission. Richard broke the silence. "Gentlemen, everything has been confirmed. The documents are legitimate. From this moment forward, there is no more doubt. Angela Williams is the majority shareholder and president of this company." A murmur rippled across the table. Some directors protested in whispers, others seemed incredulous. But Angela raised her hand, demanding silence. And when she spoke, her voice carried through the room with a force no one expected. "For years you've grown used to believing that power has a color, that competence wears a certain face. I was treated like garbage in this company, in what is rightfully my own house. But now understand this. Life brought me here not only to claim my right, but to show you that God's justice never fails." The recruiter stammered, his voice trembling. "Miss, forgive me. I didn't know, Angela cut him off, cold and resolute. "Do not call prejudice ignorance. You looked me in the eye and decided I wasn't worthy. Not because of my resume, but because of my skin. Now look around you and see. It is me you will have to answer to." He lowered his head, defeated. Angela walked slowly across the room, meeting the gaze of each director. Some tried to mask their discomfort, while others already showed respect. Then, she declared with firmness, "From this moment on, the culture of this company will change. Racism, prejudice, and humiliation will no longer have a place here. Whoever cannot adapt, stand up, and leave right now." Silence followed. No one dared to move. Angela turned back to the recruiter once more. "You are fired. And let this serve as an example to anyone who thinks power can hide behind arrogance. True power comes from character, not color." Her words echoed like thunder. Some directors swallowed hard, realizing this woman wasn't there merely to hold a title. She was there to transform the very foundation of the company. Richard moved, offered a discreet smile. "Your father would be proud of you, Angela." She took a deep breath, letting those words sink into her soul. For the first time, she truly felt she was standing where she had always belonged. And before them all, she closed the meeting with a phrase that would never be forgotten. "Today is not the end of a struggle. It is the beginning of a new story. And from this moment on, no one will ever be silenced within this company again." Power had shifted hands, and the woman who had been rejected only minutes before now commanded the room with the dignity of someone born to win. Night had fallen over the city. The lights of the skyscrapers reflected on the glass of the office where Angela remained alone, gazing at the horizon. The silence now was not one of humiliation, but of peace. She remembered every second of that day. The looks of contempt, the muffled laughter, the cruel words that had tried to crush her. And now, ironically, it was there she stood, not as a rejected candidate, but as the president of the company. Angela opened the desk drawer and found something unexpected. An old, forgotten picture frame showing her father, Michael Williams, alongside two white men in one of the company's very first meetings. In the photo, he stood in the background, almost faded, as if they had tried to erase him even from memory. She held the photo against her chest, tears streaming down. "Father, finally the world will recognize who you were. Your struggle was not in vain. Today, your name has been reborn in me." Richard entered the room quietly, respecting the moment. "Angela, this is only the beginning. There will be resistance. There will be attempts to delegitimize what you achieved today. But you have something none of them possess. The truth." Angela smiled softly. "And I have something even greater. Faith. I know it wasn't just chance that brought me here. It was the hand of God." The next day, the news spread across the city. Newspapers, websites, and television programs carried headlines such as, "Rejected candidate revealed as company owner," "Angela Williams, from humiliation to power," "Historic justice, founder's daughter assumes presidency." Employees who once looked at her with disdain now approached her with respect. Some apologized, others remained silent, ashamed. But Angela wasn't seeking revenge. She sought transformation. In her first press conference as president, she declared, "This place will no longer be a space of exclusion. It will be a place of equal opportunities, where every talent will be recognized for its true worth. Skin color will never again be a sentence of rejection." The cameras captured her strength, and many watching from home wept, feeling that finally someone was speaking for them. Deep down, Angela knew the victory was not hers alone. It belonged to all the people who had ever been silenced, rejected, made invisible. And that night, when she returned home, she knelt beside her bed in silence and gave thanks. "Thank you, Lord, because man may reject, but you exalt." Today I understood that justice may take time, but it always arrives. Looking at the sky through her window, she felt embraced by the infinite. Because the greatest victory was not the position, nor the power. The greatest victory was having remained true to herself, without giving up. Have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever been rejected when you knew your worth? Share your story in the comments. Your words might inspire someone else. Do you believe justice always comes, even if it takes time? Write your thoughts below, and never forget, God does not abandon the righteous. Goodness may be humiliated for a while, but it always triumphs in the end.